Hi everyone, welcome to Tom's Dojo. I'm your host, Tom Carroll. I don't know about you, but my favorite part of Northern Indian food is when the piping, fresh, hot naan arrives right out of the tandoor oven to your table. Later this week, my wife and I have been invited to a curry party, and we are going to be supplying the naan. I want to share with you 4 tricks that will allow you to make naan that tastes like it came right from a tandoor oven from your favorite Indian restaurant. The first is that you need the right recipe, one that features real yeast and yogurt as leavening agents instead of baking soda or baking powder. The second is that you need to know how to handle the dough and allow the dough to proof and rise properly. And that'll give the dough a nice, light, crisp texture. The third is you'll need to learn how to recreate the tandoor oven, the heat in that oven, the baking to make the bread come out as you like it to come out. And then finally, you'll need to learn how to store the bread. So I have some tips for storing the bread. Let's get to a couple of tools that you're going to need and some substitutions if you don't have those tools. The first is a baking stone or a pizza stone. These can be very expensive, but you can also get them for about $15 online, and you can get a cheap one and they work just fine. If you don't have these and you don't have time, not a problem. What you need is an oven-safe pan. So either a stainless steel pan, or what I would much prefer is a pan like this, which is a cast iron skillet. This is a 12-inch cast iron skillet, and this is wonderful. What both this skillet do and this pizza stone is they hold heat. So they cook the bottom of your naan while the top gets cooked by the broiler in your oven. So that it creates that super hot heat of a tandoor oven. The next item that you're going to need is a rolling pin of some kind. That'll make rolling out the naan, making it nice and uniform and flat, a much easier. If you don't have a rolling pin, it doesn't matter what kind you have. You can use a wine bottle or a bottle of any kind and just roll it out that way, and that works really well. Now, this isn't too difficult a recipe. I would say, using our Tom's Dojo scheme, this is about a yellow belt. So that's an intermediate beginner level recipe, not too difficult. This makes 8 naan that are about 8 to 10 inches in diameter. So it's a big piece that can be cut into quarters. And each quarter is sufficient for half of one of those naans will make a meal for most people. This takes about 3 to 3.5 hours to complete. Are you ready? Let's get our naan on. Tip number 1, the right recipe. We'll begin by adding the wet ingredients. 1.5 cups of water at 90 degrees Fahrenheit. 1/2 cup of plain whole milk yogurt, 2.5 teaspoons of granulated sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of active dry yeast, and 1 tablespoon and 2 teaspoons of vegetable oil. We'll stir to combine that and let it rest 10 minutes for the yeast to bloom. Next, we'll mix the dry ingredients, 5.5 cups of all-purpose flour. To that, we'll add 1 1/4 teaspoons of fine sea salt. Then you want to stir that to combine. We'll add the dry ingredients to the wet ingredients, and we'll mix it until all of the flour is incorporated. And then you can just switch to your hands and just make sure that all of that flour is gone. We're not doing any real kneading here, we're just combining at this point. And then we'll just cover this up and we're going to rest it for 20 minutes to let it relax a bit. Tip number 2, proper fermentation. After 20 minutes, the gluten has started to develop. You see it stretches nicely here. And we're going to stretch and fold that dough. Just fold it over itself, stretch it out, fold it over. And we'll do that for a minute or so. And the dough is going to begin to get smoother and smoother as we do this. This is the same technique we would use for an artisan bread. We'll make it into a dough ball, then we'll put a little oil in the bowl and oil the dough ball. Again, we're going to cover this up and we'll let it rise for about an hour and a half until it nearly doubles. And here it is, look at that. It's just a nice soft dough. It's not as sticky and it's quite a bit smoother. Now we're going to shape the dough. And this makes 8 dough balls, or 8 naan, that are about 8 to 10 inches in diameter. Split this right down the middle, and then we'll cut it into quarters. And then we'll cut each of those quarters in half. So I'm thinking in halves. I'm cutting the whole in half, the halves in half, and then the quarters in half. We'll use our regular dough balling technique to ball this dough. We'll fold up the corners. Then we'll put the folded side down on the counter, cup our hand over the ball, and roll it until the ball closes and is taut. So you can see this is a really handy technique. We used it for making rolls and buns. You use it for making pizza. It's really handy to be able to roll nice tight dough balls. We'll put that onto a floured sheet pan. And then we want to flour the tops of the dough lightly so it doesn't stick to the cling film. Then we're going to cover these and we're going to let it rise for 45 minutes. Once something is shaped, that rising is called proofing. Next, we're going to preheat the oven to the highest temperature it will go and put the pizza stone in there and the broiler on. You want to add your dough ball to a floured surface and get out your rolling pin. We're going to flour both sides of the dough ball and then we'll flatten it out with our fingertips. See when I'm pressing it down and it's flattening it out? Then I'll use the rolling pin to roll it from the center outward to create a nice round naan. If you make a mistake while rolling out your dough, just roll it back up, rest it 10 minutes, and start again. Once I'm satisfied it's to the diameter I want it, and it's nice and round, or round enough, then I'm going to put some oil on the surface, a little vegetable oil on the top, and I'll rub it in. This does a couple of things. It helps with the browning and the crisping, and also prevents the dough from sticking to itself. I'm going to use a fork to dock the dough, and that just means to poke holes in it so that it doesn't rise into a big bubble in the oven. I will lift the dough very gently onto the back of my hand to carry it to the oven. Tip 3, oven technique. Now the oven's been preheated and that broiler's on. It's about 550 degrees and very hot. I take the dough over and put an oven mitt on one hand, and I have the dough on the back of the other hand. I pull out the rack, and then I gently lay from front to back the dough onto the pizza stone. There it goes. I just poke down the areas that were overlapping. And I'm going to cook this only about a minute. You see it starts to blister on the top. And now I'm going to turn it around real quickly because it's not browning evenly in my oven. It's cooler at the front. That's after about 2 minutes, and that is done. You see the bubbles on the top are all nicely browned and the bottom is nicely brown. Take a look at those nice blisters and and that nice browning. It's both crisp and tender at the same time. A nicely fermented dough. It's delicious. I will cut it into 4 pieces. 2 of those pieces make a meal for most people. You can eat your naan plain, or once it comes out of the oven, you can brush it with hot butter or ghee and garlic, or just plain butter and some finishing salt. Or you might want to add to the dough nigella seeds to give them an interesting anise and cumin kind of flavor. Some people will add cilantro to the butter or sesame seeds. Tip number 4, store your naan correctly. Well, I hope your naan turned out delicious. You probably have a lot of leftovers at this point. If you do, what you want to do is just allow them to cool on the counter. Once they reach room temperature, go ahead and put them in a plastic bag like this. And then you can freeze them up to a few months, or you can leave them on the counter for a few days. If you want to heat them up, all you need to do is just put the room temperature naan in a foil packet. Just get some aluminum foil and make a little packet. Put them in your oven at 350 degrees for 10 or 12 minutes, and then they come out crisp and nice and still tender in the middle, just like you like them. If this video was valuable to you, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, share it with your friends, and I'll bet you probably have some successes you'd like to share, so please tell me about it. Or if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great week of baking. We'll see you in the dojo next week.